Hi, folks. I'm going to dive right in because I don't have a lot of time and I have a lot that I want to share. Um, so, first of all, I want to kind of talk about the problem space here. Like, there's been a lot of studies. One that I think about a lot is data from surveying 3,600 workflows, value streams across organizations, and a finding that engineers only spend 8% of their time producing work that actually makes it to customers or potentially makes it to customers, right? Deliverable doesn't actually mean delivered. But, I've seen this number, this percentage actually way lower than this in different contexts. And that's a huge amount of waste, right? So what are we talking about? Why does this happen? We're working through these repeated software development lifecycle activities all the time, and we deal with all these conditions that get in the way of us being productive, right? And all of this is worse because we're working in groups of people, which means there's more opportunities for interruption, distraction, moving pieces, people stepping on toes, having different incentives and misalignment. There's so much that can go wrong. And I'm sure we all have experience with all of it going wrong. And platforms really should be helping us address this problem, right? All the way from what I call hypothesis to happiness through the entire life cycle. And, you know, they should be enabling uh, the smooth operation of work through all these different stages. And we should be able to eliminate blocks and things that get in the way of doing our best work. And I think that, a tool that doesn't get talked about a lot in the platform world is mapping. It's one of my favorite things to get together with people and get everything that's stuck in our heads out onto a shared visible workspace, something that we can all play with and um, massage and iterate on and build out a shared understanding of not only what's happening, but what we should do about it. And this is not just me, right? This is finally a lot of people are talking about this. ThoughtWorks has been doing this for ages with what they call path to production mapping. So, mapping out everything it takes to get to production. And, they only recently thought to kind of put this in front of other people as their number one recommendation. But why is it such a powerful tool for us to use? Like coming together, what we can do is kind of identify these opportunities for improving flow as a group. And by doing this together, we're engaging people who aren't necessarily connected to higher level goals, or they feel excluded by workflow or isolated. We're bringing them out and getting them involved in imagining what we could do better. We develop a shared understanding which brings us into alignment on the same goals, or the same challenges to pursue instead of pulling in different directions. But this is also highly customized to our context. Like any given organization or team at any point in time, you're going to get a unique outcome from this that fits your context and your needs. The other thing is that we learn by doing, right? We're building this out and we're building an understanding at the same time, meaning this is not just an effort that, you do once and goes away. We can come back to the board over and over again. We can come back and iterate on maps to build this shared understanding of what's invisible to us on a regular basis, right? We can't see what other people are thinking or focused on, but a map helps us do that. And then perhaps most valuable these days is that we can do all this remotely. We can do this on Zoom with a shared whiteboard, and it's very effective. I've been doing this for many years now throughout COVID and beforehand. So, how do we actually get started with this, right? Who does it? It's great to have a group of people that represent the different aspects of the work that's getting done. But one of the things that I want to point out here is that it's a great opportunity to engage senior leadership, because they can bring support, they can bring funding, but it's also very important for them to understand what everybody on the ground and everybody in the trenches is actually dealing with. And mapping gives you the chance to kind of connect and bridge those separate perspectives. So, what I suggest with, when starting with mapping is first understand what you're dealing with, understand your current situation. And so, I like to look at a couple different areas: pains, goals, questions, ideas. You can include context like OKRs or strategic plans or a roadmap in here, just a way to bring everybody into the same understanding. But with a collaborative whiteboard, we can just get all this out, right? And we can sort it, group it. We can do affinity mapping to see, okay, well, all these things seem to be related to this one area, like migration to a new cloud or adopting a new technology or dealing with a UX or, a DX concern. And we can vote on all these things. Like there's a number of different ways that we can prioritize and filter, which is really powerful for getting clarity on where should we focus. But once we know where we want to focus, we can break that down and try to understand it from a deeper perspective, right? If we have a target, it's really important to understand, why is this the target? Why is this important? Because not everybody can be in the room, not everybody can be in the workshop where we're setting this out. And sometimes we lose track of it, right? We get going and we're like, why are we even doing this? And it could be important to one individual or our senior leadership, and we have to make it valuable to everybody, right? The people who are going to do the work. So this gives us an opportunity to just lay that out and make it clear. But we can also look at what's going to hold us back. What are the things that are in our way? As another way of just getting it out and dealing with it early, or surfacing it early, so that we're not surprised later and we can plan to avoid any challenges. And then we can lay out exactly what we're going to do to move forward, to take our first steps. And one of the first steps that I really like diving into is mapping out a value stream. So looking at the entire end-to-end flow of our software delivery lifecycle, for instance, because a platform is meant to support those activities, right? Make it easy for you to do your work and understand how that work is performing from, a holistic end-to-end perspective, the entire path to production. So we can lay that out on a board. We can add measurement to give us some understanding of, where are we spending most of our time? Where do things start to break down? Where are we having most of the friction? You can do this with data. You can do this with voting. You can do this with notes on a board. But it's important to highlight a hotspot because we can't do everything, right? So we want to focus our energy and our efforts on what we think is the most important thing. So once we have that, we can go even deeper than that. So we can map now, what is contributing to this problem state? What's contributing to the hotspot that we see in the workflow? And we can break that down. Sometimes it's an external dependency. Sometimes it's a missing capability or an unserved capability. Maybe we have a shared services team that has a giant backlog, and they don't have time to work with us, or they just ignore every request because they're overburdened, and so they've just put up a wall. So we can kind of highlight these things and get them out. Maybe we can share this map with that group and show, here's what we're seeing. Tell us what we're missing. How can we help? How can we help you help us, right? There's a lot of great conversations that can come out of this mapping. So if we zoom out a little bit and we start to look at, okay, what does this flow actually mean in the context of an organization? We have kind of these primary value streams, right? These software delivery life cycles that are connected to customer outcomes, our external customers, but they're supported by these internal workflows, these value streams that are supporting the customer facing value streams. So some people call these core and supportive streams. But what's important here is that we start to see that all these workflows are interconnected. So if you want to unlock better flow for a mobile app, maybe you're missing, something in your platform development that would accelerate it and enhance your ability to deliver, um, valuable work at that higher level. So how do we start to see this at a broader scale, at an organizational scale? And I like thinking about this in terms of, what are these teams actually doing? What are these streams of work actually doing? And across two dimensions, I find this really, really powerful. So on one side, developmental, what does that mean? Right? So developmental activities are changing constantly, they're evolving, we're looking for innovation. It's very difficult to measure performance because we don't really know what works yet. And we have very few standards because everything is just constantly in flux, right? So we can think of different workflows on that end of the spectrum. We can also think about workflows on the other end of the spectrum where things are highly standardized, operationalized. There's lots of standards in place. It's very predictable. We've defined metrics for everything. And all of our work is going to kind of fall along this spectrum across each of the teams that we have. And, roughly to summarize this, we're looking at a lot of mess on the developmental side, and we're looking at a lot of rigidity and, status quo is everything on the operational side. And we've got to marry the two of these things, right? The magic happens in the middle where we're getting, the appropriate mix depending on our goals. And this can be a really helpful way to think about platform, right? Do we want more standardization or more innovation, right? So we can have conversations about where on the spectrum do we want to sit. The other valuable dimension that I find here is proximity to customer, right? So if we think about where everything should sit, and we're thinking back to core and supportive, these things that are customer facing that directly connect to customer outcomes, they're sitting in closer to the top of this map, right? So we can start to place all of these workflows in context with each other and lay them out in proximity to each other. And then we can have conversations about where they are and where they might perform a little bit better, where they might actually fit our needs better. So if we take a DevOps team, for instance, a shared services team, you saw they were connected to all these other teams, which means they get interrupted a lot. They're constantly asked to do things. There's very little visibility into what is important to them, what they're trying to do, what they're working on, what their level of technical debt is. Their roadmap is very difficult to align to their goals. Their goal is, we want to work on our own stuff, not other people's stuff necessarily. Or, we want to invest in something that's going to help in the long term, and everyone's bugging us with short-term concerns, right? So we can kind of understand their work by placing them in this context, in the appropriate context that fits what they're doing, and have a good discussion about, like, how do we deal with this? We have a conflict here. How do we resolve it? And so a common, practice these days is to move from shared services to something like an internal development platform. What does that mean, right? How does that change the landscape, right? So we can map that out and have these discussions about, okay, well, we want the ability to innovate, but we have to satisfy these standards, right? If we operationalize this, we're going to have to integrate security control. So that's going to pull us further to the right. What's an appropriate level for this? And how do we think about these trade-offs so we're not too far in one direction? And we can share this context and have really good conversations about this. So what happens when we do this? We share visibility and understanding across multiple individuals, but also multiple groups. We can be reaching across departments and sharing these maps or building these maps together, which means that we share not only visibility, but, a common sense of alignment and ownership over where we are and where we want to go. We reduce stress and cognitive load by saying, we don't have to figure everything out on our own. We have a clear understanding that, allows us to focus and talk about very specific things instead of being ambiguous and, constantly wondering where we are and where we should go. We have the ability to align and act quickly, right? A lot of these maps, we build them in 90 minutes, right? So very quickly lay something out and get agreement on where we are and where we want to go. And then all this flow improvement just unlocks more time for what we really want to work on, which is what's next, what's important to the company, what's important to customers, what's going to really make a difference. So if you're interested in this area, I recently wrote a book with my co-author Andrew Davis about engineering flow in organizations with this method of collaborative mapping, and it all kind of centers around value stream mapping, but it's a pretty comprehensive program of start to finish chaos and mess, and we don't really know what to focus on, to a clear roadmap of where we're headed. So I would love for you to check that out. Thank you for the time and enjoy the conference.